The Greyhound station smelled like diesel fuel and yesterday's rain. It was 6:47 a.m., and the first pale light of morning was just starting to bleed through the scratched plexiglass windows. The building was nearly empty. Just a janitor pushing a mop across cracked linoleum, and a woman asleep against her duffel bag in the corner. And Kiana, 23 years old, sitting on a molded plastic bench with 3 infant car seats arranged in front of her like a fortress. Her hands were shaking as she tried to fold a receiving blanket that kept slipping through her fingers. Her eyes were raw, swollen from crying, but bone dry now. She'd run out of tears somewhere around 4 a.m. The triplets, 2 boys and a girl, were miraculously asleep. Their tiny chests rose and fell in perfect rhythm, oblivious to the fact that everything in their mother's world had just collapsed. Behind her, leaning against a support beam, was everything she owned. 3 black garbage bags stuffed with clothes, a diaper box overflowing with formula cans and wipes, a backpack with her laptop, her biology textbook, and a single framed photo of her grandmother. She'd been evicted. Not next week, not tomorrow, yesterday. The sheriff had knocked at 9 a.m. She'd opened the door with 1 baby on her hip and the other 2 crying in their pack-and-play. He'd handed her the notice with an apologetic nod and told her she had 2 hours. 2 hours to pack up 4 lives. 2 hours to figure out where a broke college student with newborn triplets was supposed to go. Her phone buzzed in her lap. She didn't even look at it anymore. She knew who it was. Marcus Holloway. 51 years old, CEO of Holloway Capital Group, net worth somewhere north of $30 million, owner of a penthouse downtown, a summer home in the Hamptons, and a reputation that could open or close any door in the city. And according to him, the father of her children. Kiana stared down at the sleeping babies. Ezra, Isaiah, Amara, 6 weeks old, perfect, innocent. And the center of a storm she never saw coming. Her phone buzzed again, then again. She finally glanced at the screen. 12 missed calls, 18 texts, all from Marcus. The last one read, "I know where you are. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Those children are mine, Kiana. We need to talk. Now." Her stomach twisted. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a crumpled envelope. Inside was a single document, printed on expensive letterhead, signed by Marcus's attorney. Petition for emergency custody. He wasn't just claiming the babies. He was trying to take them. Kiana pressed her fists against her temples and tried to breathe, tried to think, tried to remember how the hell she'd gotten here. But all she could see was Marcus's face the night he found out she was pregnant. The way his expression had shifted, from shock to calculation to something she couldn't name. And the way he'd looked at her 6 weeks ago, standing in the hospital room as she held 3 newborns against her chest, and said with absolute certainty, "They're mine. I know they are." Even though Kiana knew that wasn't possible. The janitor's mop squeaked across the floor. A bus engine rumbled outside. Somewhere in the station, a vending machine hummed. And Kiana sat there, alone, surrounded by everything she had left in the world, wondering how a man who had everything could be so desperate to claim something that was never his. 14 months earlier, Kiana's life looked completely different.
She was a junior at Commonwealth University, majoring in molecular biology, with a 3.8 GPA. She'd earned a full academic scholarship, one of only 12 awarded that year, and she was on track to apply for medical school the following fall. She lived in a cramped studio apartment on the north side of campus, the kind of place where the radiator clanked all night and the fridge only worked if you didn't open it too often. But it was hers. She paid for it with 2 part-time jobs, tutoring underclassmen in chemistry and working weekend shifts at a campus coffee shop. Her life was structured. disciplined. She woke up at 5:30 every morning to study before class. She meal prepped on Sundays. She didn't party. She didn't date. She was surviving. And then she met Marcus Holloway. It happened at a university fundraiser, a black tie gala held in the gilded ballroom of the Rothschild Hotel. Kiana hadn't wanted to go, but her academic advisor had insisted. Networking, she'd said. You need to start building connections if you want a future in research. So Kiana had borrowed a dress from her roommate, straightened her hair, and shown up feeling like an imposter in a room full of donors who wrote checks with more zeros than she'd seen in a decade. She was standing near the appetizer table, trying to look busy, when a man in a charcoal suit approached her. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else." She had turned, startled, and found herself looking up at Marcus Holloway. He was tall, broad-shouldered, silver starting to thread through his dark hair. His smile was warm, disarming, the kind that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. "That obvious?" she said. "Only to someone who feels the same way." They'd talked for 20 minutes. He told her he'd grown up poor, that he'd put himself through community college before building his investment firm from the ground up. She told him about her scholarship, her dream of becoming a doctor, the biology research she was doing on genetic markers for sickle cell anemia. He listened, really listened. And when the night ended, he handed her his card. "If you ever need advice, career, funding, anything, call me." She hadn't planned to. But 3 weeks later, when her landlord raised her rent by $200 a month, and she realized she couldn't afford both rent and textbooks, she did. Marcus met her for coffee. He asked about her research, her goals, her struggles, and then he made her an offer. "Let me help you, not as charity, as an investment. I believe in what you're doing, Kiana. Let me fund your research stipend for the year. You focus on school, I'll take care of the rest." She should have said no. She should have seen the red flags. The way his hand lingered on hers when he handed her the check, the way his texts started coming late at night, the way he always seemed to have time for her even though he ran a multi-million-dollar company. But she was drowning, and he was offering her air. So she said yes. The relationship, if you could even call it that, started slowly. Dinners, meetings, long conversations about her future. He was charming, thoughtful, generous. And then one night, it became something else. She didn't know how to describe it. It wasn't love. It wasn't even really attraction. It was convenience, comfort, a transaction that felt mutual if it wasn't equal. She told herself it was fine. She told herself she was in control. And then 3 months later, she missed her period. The pregnancy test sat on the edge of her bathroom sink, 2 pink lines glaring up at her like an accusation. Kiana had stared at it for 20 minutes, her mind spinning through every possible outcome, every impossible decision. She called Marcus that night. He came to her apartment within the hour. She showed him the test, and she watched his face change. Not with joy, not with fear, with something colder. Calculation. "Are you sure it's mine?" he'd asked. The question had hit her like a slap. "What?" "I'm just asking, Kiana. We need to be realistic." "I haven't been with anyone else, Marcus." He'd nodded slowly, thoughtfully, like he was running numbers in his head. "Okay," he'd said finally. "Okay, we'll figure this out." But his voice didn't sound reassuring. It sounded like a man making a business decision. At her first ultrasound, the technician had gone quiet. Too quiet. And then she turned the screen toward Kiana and said, very gently, "Congratulations, you're having triplets." Kiana had felt the room tilt. 3 babies.
3. Marcus, sitting in the chair beside her, had gone pale. And then, slowly, he'd started to smile. 3, he'd whispered. 3 children. It wasn't until later, weeks later, that Kiana realized how strange that moment had been. How his shock had shifted so quickly into something that looked almost like satisfaction. Kiana gave birth on a Tuesday in March. 36 weeks. Emergency C-section, 3 tiny, fragile lives pulled from her body in under an hour. She woke up in a recovery room with stitches pulling across her abdomen and a nurse telling her the babies were in the NICU, but stable. Marcus had been there. He'd held her hand, whispered reassurances, and then he'd gone down to the NICU alone. Kiana didn't think much of it at the time. She was exhausted, medicated, overwhelmed. But later, much later, she would remember the look on his face when he came back. The strange, quiet certainty in his eyes. The babies came home after 12 days. Kiana moved through those first weeks in a haze of sleepless nights and endless feedings. Marcus helped financially. He paid for the NICU bills, bought formula, sent a night nurse twice a week, but he was distant, distracted. And then one afternoon, he showed up at her apartment unannounced. He didn't knock. He used the key she'd given him months ago. She was on the couch, nursing Amara, the boys asleep in their bassinets. Marcus stood in the doorway holding an envelope. "We need to talk," he said. His tone made her stomach drop. He sat down across from her, opened the envelope, pulled out a stack of papers. "I've been thinking a lot about the future, about what's best for the children." "Okay. I think they should live with me." Kiana froze. "What?" "I have the resources, Kiana. The space, the stability. You're still in school. You're barely making ends meet. I can give them everything." "They're my children, Marcus."
"They're ours." "No," she said, her voice shaking. "No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to swoop in and take them because you have money. I'm not taking them. I'm offering to provide for them. There's a difference." "Get out. Kiana, get out." He'd left, but the papers stayed on her coffee table. Petition for custody evaluation. 2 weeks later, she got the eviction notice. Her landlord claimed she'd violated the lease. Too many occupants, noise complaints, late rent payments. All lies. But it didn't matter. The sheriff came, she packed, and by sunset, she was sitting in a Greyhound station with 3 babies and nowhere to go. And Marcus was calling, texting, insisting, "Let me help you. Let me take care of them. This doesn't have to be so hard." But Kiana knew the truth. He didn't want to help her. He wanted to erase her. Marcus found her at the station. She didn't know how. Maybe he'd tracked her phone. Maybe he'd hired someone. Maybe he just knew her well enough to guess. But at 8:15 a.m., the automatic doors slid open and there he was. Tailored coat, polished shoes, the kind of man who looked like he owned the building. Kiana's heart slammed into her ribs. "Kiana." His voice was calm. Too calm. She stood up instinctively, positioning herself between him and the car seats. "You need to leave," she said. "I'm not here to fight." "Then why are you here?" He stepped closer, not threatening, just present. "Because those children deserve better than this. Don't look at yourself, Kiana. You're sitting in a bus station with 3 newborns. You have nowhere to go, no plan, no money. I'll figure it out." "You don't have to." His voice softened. "I'm offering you a solution. Let me take care of them. Let me give them the life they deserve." "They're my kids, Marcus. They're mine, too." "No," she said, her voice breaking. "No, they're not." He went still. "What did you say?" Kiana's hands were shaking. She hadn't meant to say it, hadn't meant to open this door, but it was too late now. "They're not yours, Marcus." His expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. "Explain." She swallowed hard. "The timing, it doesn't line up. I know when I got pregnant, and it wasn't. You're lying."
I'm not. You're lying because you're scared, because you know I can give them more than you ever could. But it won't work, Kiana. I've already spoken to my attorney. I've already filed the petition. Then get a DNA test. The words hung in the air like a blade. Marcus stared at her. And then, slowly, he smiled. "Fine," he said. "Let's do it. Let's get a DNA test. And when it proves I'm right, when it proves those children are mine, you're going to step aside. Do you understand?" Kiana's chest tightened, because she knew something Marcus didn't. She knew the test would prove her right. But she also knew that even if it did, it wouldn't change anything. Marcus Holloway didn't lose. Not ever. The DNA test was scheduled for the following Monday. Marcus insisted on using his own lab, a private facility downtown, the kind with leather chairs in the waiting room and soft jazz playing over hidden speakers. Kiana showed up with the babies in a borrowed stroller, her stomach knotted with dread. Marcus was already there. Suit, tie, calm. The procedure was quick, painless. Cheek swabs for all 3 babies, one for Marcus, one for Kiana. The technicians said results would take 3 to 5 days. Marcus left without a word. Kiana went back to the shelter she'd been staying at, a church-run facility on the south side that smelled like industrial soap, and let her stay as long as she helped with evening meal prep. She tried to sleep. She couldn't, because deep down, she knew the test wouldn't solve anything. Even if Marcus wasn't the father, he wouldn't let go. Men like him didn't accept being wrong. The results came back on Thursday. Kiana's phone rang at 11:47 a.m. Unknown number. She answered. "Ms. Morris? This is Dr. Patel from GenaCare Diagnostics. I'm calling with the results of your paternity test." Her throat went dry. "Okay." "The test shows that Marcus Holloway is not the biological father of any of the 3 children." Relief. Terror. Both at once. "Thank you," she whispered. She hung up, and then, 20 seconds later, her phone rang again. Marcus. She didn't answer. He called again and again, and then the text started. "We need to talk now. I don't care what the test says. Those children are mine, Kiana. I don't need DNA to know that."
"I'm coming to see you. Don't try to run." Kiana stared at the screen, her blood turning to ice. And that's when she realized. He'd already known. He'd known the whole time. 3 months later, Kiana got the call. Marcus Holloway had suffered a massive stroke. He was in the ICU at St. Catherine's Hospital, unresponsive, on full life support. His attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Diane, called Kiana directly. "He's been asking for you," Diane said quietly. "Well, not asking, but your name is in his medical directives. He wanted you contacted if anything happened." Kiana almost hung up, but something stopped her. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was closure, or maybe it was the part of her that still didn't understand why Marcus had been so obsessed with children who weren't even his. She took the babies to her neighbor, she borrowed bus fare, and she went. The ICU was cold and sterile. Marcus lay in the bed, tubes running from his arms, a ventilator hissing softly beside him. He looked smaller than she remembered, older, human. Diane met her outside the room. "He's been in and out of consciousness," she said, "but he's been asking for you, or trying to." "Why?" Kiana asked. "Why does he want to see me?" Diane hesitated, and then she handed Kiana an envelope. "He wrote this a week ago, before the stroke. He told me to give it to you if anything ever happened to him. Kiana took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a single handwritten letter. Kiana, if you're reading this, I'm either dead or close to it, and I owe you the truth. The babies aren't mine. I know that. I've always known that. I knew the timeline didn't match. I knew you were telling the truth. But I didn't care. 23 years ago, I had a daughter. Her name was Maya. She was born when I was 28. Young, broke, stupid. Her mother and I weren't together. I didn't want kids, so I walked away. I told myself it was the right choice, that I wasn't ready, that I'd come back when I had money, when I was stable. But I never did. Maya grew up without me, and when she was 16, she died, leukemia. I found out 3 weeks after her funeral. I never met her, Kiana. I never held her. I never told her I was sorry. And I've spent every day since then trying to outrun that guilt. When you told me you were pregnant, when I saw those 3 babies on the ultrasound, I didn't see your children. I saw a second chance. I know that's not fair. I know it's not right. But I couldn't let go. Because if I could be a father to them, if I could give them everything I didn't give Maida, then maybe I could forgive myself. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for trying to take them. I'm sorry for hurting you.
But I need you to know I loved them. Not because they were mine, but because I wanted them to be. Marcus. Kiana folded the letter with trembling hands. She walked into the room. Marcus's eyes were half open, clouded with pain and medication. But when he saw her, something in his expression shifted. Recognition. Relief. She sat down beside the bed. I read your letter, she said quietly. He tried to speak, but the ventilator made it impossible. Tears slid down his temples. Kiana reached out slowly, carefully, and took his hand. You can't fix the past by stealing someone else's future, she whispered. His fingers tightened around hers. But I forgive you. His breath hitched. And then, slowly, his grip loosened. The heart monitor beeped once, twice. And then it flatlined. Kiana sat there for a long time after the nurses came, after they turned off the machines, after they covered Marcus's body with a white sheet. She sat there and thought about second chances, about guilt, about love, about the things people do when they're drowning, and about the babies waiting for her at home, her babies, who would grow up knowing their mother fought for them, even when a millionaire tried to buy them, even when the world tried to take them. She would tell them the truth someday, but for now, she just held Marcus's letter in her hands and walked out into the sunlight.